You're listening to New England Real Estate Journal Radio with Rick Kaplan, New England source for commercial real estate news. This is New England Real Estate Journal Radio on the Money Matters Radio Network and online at moneymattersboston.com.
Welcome to the New England Real Estate Journal Radio Show. I'm Rick Kaplan with Eric Wilson, and we have in the studio with us Jeff Fullerton. He is a principal consultant in acoustics at Accentec.
Close enough.
Accentec.
Yes. Accentec, yeah. Great.
What is Accentec?
Accentec's a acoustical consulting firm. We work all over the nation, the world, and Accentec's actually an acronym. So acoustics is the AC, EN means environment, environmental sound, and then tech being the technology that we work on. So it's a bit of a mashup of different things that represents the different areas we serve.
Well, in our next segment, we're going to talk with Jeff, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what Accentec really does. But right now, I want to ask Eric, what have you been up to the past week?
Past week we went to IREM's economic forecast breakfast and listened to Elliot Eisenberg enlighten us on.
Tell us how wonderful everything is. The economy is.
And especially how great it is if you're over 65, widowed or divorced. I want to say white female.
Yeah,
right.
That's
you
right.
say that's the highest or the best class to be in at this point, and they're gonna have a great 2015. So. Unfortunately, I'm the opposite of all those things, so I should have a great 2015 myself.
Well,
that's about it, though. Other than that, Rick,
you're not white?
Oh, yeah.
So you're not the opposite of all those things.
Close.
They had a Boston the release of the Plan for Action on Climate Change.
Mm-hmm, the Green of 8 plan.
Yeah, and it says that pretty much Boston will be underwater.
Well, I mean, in the future, with the scientists have been saying with the sea level rising, I don't know if Boston will be underwater, but some of it will be if the water continues to rise.
If it rises 2 feet,
right?
It's gonna,
and that's a big rise. Yeah,
it's gonna overflow onto all the coastline there.
Right, all the seaport which they're building on right now. But I'm sure it's all about taking action in order to prevent that. By building higher and things like that, I'm sure. And
yeah, they probably have some kind of a drainage or some kind of a way to make that compensate for that water.
Right. Well, I hope they had that plan in place before they started building on the seaport.
But they, John Barrows, he's the city's chief economic development. Mm-hmm. He was talking about in January 2014. The nor'easter we had.
Yeah, last year.
The water was coming up over by the Seaport District as well.
Yeah, you remember that was wasn't that the same storm that hit Sandy Hook that we got that came up here?
In 2014?
No, what was the one? Hurricane Sandy, wasn't that?
No, that
was 2013?
Yeah, that was 2013.
Oh.
2014 was in... was
it the nor'easter?
Yeah, we had like a nor'easter. It was windy and cold. And
I remember because I live in the Marshfield, so I know that Brant Rock was flooded. I remember all the local floodings that we get pretty much anytime there's a huge storm down in Brant Rock.
Yeah, well, I mean, climate can change. The climate change is going to be a concern, I think, throughout the whole world. And,
yes, definitely seacoasts.
If you believe in that, and
I'm glad this is one of those up for belief debates. Well, I have faith that climate change is real. Because I agree with the 97% of the scientists, but I would say that everyone's doing this. California, obviously, as well, especially in America. But then,
it's always safe to be safe than sorry.
Of course, why not take preventative measures even if you don't know the outcome? I mean,
and we can see how the weather has been changing. The weather patterns throughout the whole world have
the
just
monster
been
storms.
Crazy. Yeah.
Another great thing, though, we did see in the news this week, because I sit on the science boards, is China built a 5-building apartment complex. 5-story using a 3D printer.
3D printer. That's amazing.
That is.
A 3D printer building your building.
Right. They had said that, if you go through the article, it's like 30% reduction in waste, 80% reduction in labor force, 70% better for the environment for what you're using. And I read those things not because I understand that it could help us.
But
in the
one of the
construction
other
of
things they
planet.
were saying is a lot of the materials they use in that 3D printer were recycled materials.
Pieces of glass, use glass and put it in there.
Right.
And they did, a different type of, what do they say, an S shape in order for the reinforcement, also to allow electrical to get in
Right,
there.
a crisscross formation in the concrete or the mixture that they put together. So it gives it extra support.
Yeah, it's definitely worth reading.
Although I'm not too sure I want to be living in a building that was made from a copy machine.
Maybe not. That's the funny thing, Rick. Maybe not right now. But you have to take the first step in order to get to the top of the staircase and what you want. And the reason I brought it up is because I read these things, and someday if you want to colonize the moon, you want to colonize other planets, you're probably going to have to send a 3D printer up there to build all the places before you get there to make it habitual for you to live. So this is the first step. And then, within the next 100 years, I'm sure they're going to perfect the 3D printer down to making this almost like your smartphone. Remember the first cell phones we got?
I do.
And everyone's like, I don't think anyone's going to carry around that backpack all
Right.
day. And you're like, yeah, no one's going to. This isn't going to make it. 5 years later, now it's a handheld device. And next thing you know, it's now a smartphone, and, it's 30 years.
Yeah,
So
I just
things
don't.
change.
I'm concerned about the 3D printer, which has some pros, but it has a lot of cons to it because it.
Like freedom.
Well, you're also going to eliminate a lot of jobs.
You don't eliminate jobs, you evolve jobs. Jobs are, just because you eliminate a type of
So
industry
now
doesn't mean there's not a new industry involved.
That whole manufacturing of a home.
A home,
or
a
a
car,
building.
or anything coming up
It
soon.
comes down to one guy that's going to just press the start button on the
Right,
copy
but
machine.
what happens if that machine breaks? Someone's going to need to know more about 3D printers. This will create a whole new industry of manufacturing. It'll just evolve the industry of manufacturing. You still have people there to oversee it because someone still has to get blamed. No one blames machines.
Yeah, but now
blame
they
the user.
also use a software to design it.
Right. They already do
So
that.
they use a CAD program,
Right.
which would design the structure, and then I guess they just download the software or the design into the computer.
Well, isn't this kind of what we already do through other machines? Is like when you put a car together, the car doesn't come right out and all assembled. It comes out in small pieces made by different machines. Now you just have a 3D printer, one printer that can make all those pieces.
Well, yeah, because you used to be able to build a lot of like cars. You could build that out of with robotics.
Right.
Well, this would eliminate that as well.
Yeah, you
this
wouldn't need that
this
as
is
well.
now evolved from the robotics to
Right.
a machine that just builds and
And-
assembles everything all at once.
Right. If you can get it big enough, right now at the stage it's at is you build pieces at a time and you still have to go assemble them yourself. But again, we're looking for the future where if you've been looking at Boston Dynamics, they just had their second prototype of the Atlas robot come out. These are going to be things I'm sure in the next 200 years that pretty soon. And I was telling Corey, I wish I was alive in the 200-year time because we may not even be working. We might be just sending our robots into work, and we may. Just
What
be
would
handing
that
out
be
collecting
so?
money off
Why
what
would
they
that
do.
be so different from now?
Well, because we still have to go to work and go to the office. But imagine if you could just push a button and my
Oh,
screen pops up in that thing's face, and I'm out on the beach going, yeah. You can talk to my robot.
Oh,
He'll
so
fix
now
this."
that would make it so you wouldn't even have to go to the
You
office.
wouldn't have to because you'd have a robot, right? I mean, I never understood, even in the movies I watch iRobot in the future, you're like, why are people still going to work? Isn't that what your robot's for? Your robot is what, cleaning your house? Now, you stay home, clean your house, and you send your robot to do the hard stuff. That would make your life easier.
I just don't know where that all of this will come to. I mean, this is all.
Hopefully, space travel. That's where I want to go to. Hopefully, they recognize that there's other resources in our galaxy other than what we have on this planet, and we can go find those as well. And this will allow us the next step.
You really think that we're going to go
Mine
expand
comments-
into other
galaxies and
galaxies?
planets? Yes.
and
What do you mean?
universe?
We have no other choice. It's not like we're telling people to stop having babies. At one
No,
point in
but-
time, in 100 years, what do they say? There's going to be
The way the wars and everything.
17 billion people on this
The
planet.
way the
We barely-
wars and everything are going right now, I don't know if we'll have that many people.
But with all the wars that have happened on the planet, we still have a birth rate that far exceeds the death rate. So you're always going to continue. Population is going to continue to grow. It's always going to be that way, and then you're going to run out of resources. We're already running out of resources. And the more resources we need in order to fill this planet and the people, the more CO2 we pump in the air, the more we worry about climate change until we're at a point where we need to get in some ships and get onto another planet.
But unless
and be like what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to go and populate.
But that's an old story about we're running out of resources because they said that about oil. Mm-hmm. We're running out of oil. Now we have
they will at some point.
We have an overabundance of oil.
Well, for right now's time period.
Yeah.
Because they assume that we're not going to be using oil in 100 years because we're supposed to be smarter than the generation
it always
prior to us.
There's always, unless you're actually in that industry or that field, you don't really know what's really going on and what's the real truth.
Yes. They are running out of oil. There's only so many dinosaurs. And that's what oil is. It's dinosaurs.
Yeah, but the oil,
all the things from the prehistoric
consumption
eras
has gone way down as well.
For what?
For oil.
Where?
Throughout the whole world.
What? No, that can't be possible. With all the emerging nations, they have to be using more oil.
It has gone down.
Well, that's good news, but still, we still have to space travel. Rick, we need that on your agenda. You need to be on the right page.
And I think that's where you've been living.
Yes, we need to go to space travel.
Well, we're going to go to a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk with Jeff Fullerton, is a principal consultant in acoustics at Ascentech. And we'll be right back on Money Matters Radio Network.
The next level in commercial real estate. This is New England Real Estate Radio on the Money Matters Radio Network and online at moneymattersboston.com.
Commercial real estate can be a risky endeavor if you don't have all the information you need to make an educated decision. Why spend time digging for data when CompStack provides investors, lenders, and landlords accurate lease comps for office, industrial, and retail properties, starting rents, concessions, and more in just a few clicks? The world's largest investors and lenders use CompStack to benchmark their properties and underwrite their deals. Shouldn't you? CompStack. Better data, better deals. Visit getleasecomps.com today.
And we're back on New England Real Estate Journal Radio. I'm Rick Kaplan with Eric Wilson. And before we start our interview with Jeff, I just want to remind everybody, January 29th at the Hyatt Regency in Boston, we have Cocktails and Conversation. We have quite a few sponsors that will be there, as well as all the associations that are going to have their own booths. Mm-hmm. But Select Solar, Select Energy is one of the platinum sponsors. Eldorado Stone, a gold sponsor. Silver sponsors, we have Bucker Plan, The News Funnel, CompStack, Conquest Capital Partners, and our bronze sponsor, New England Restaurant Brokers. And we're going to be talking with Jeff Fullerton. He is a principal consultant in acoustics at Ascentech. And we're going to find out a little bit about what Ascentech is.
Sure. So Ascentech is a company that is composed of, I think we have about 60 employees who focus on acoustics. And the acoustics might relate to the architecture and buildings. It might relate to sound systems and IT or information systems. Or it might relate to products, transportation systems, outdoor noise, any number of things. So we're looking at sound based on any number of different environments you might hear it in.
So you're talking about, what kind of facility would need that kind of use?
Gosh, almost any facility. The radio station we're in would have acoustical design to it to make sure that the background sound is quiet, so the air conditioning doesn't interrupt the important things you guys are saying.
Why, is that bothering you?
No, it's fine. Okay. It's actually a quietly selected piece of equipment. But almost any building you can think of has some sort of acoustical aspect to it. And whether or not it's important to the program and whether people recognize that is sort of the question. But we have a lot of clients most of our clients are architects, engineers, or building owners. And we work with them basically to improve the acoustics of spaces to make their programs work more effectively. And that might be a higher education facility, it might be a corporate facility, it might be a healthcare facility. A lot of residential work. So there's sound that impacts people in almost any building you can think of.
Now, if they're consulting with you about the acoustics, is it usually because they have either some kind of a video program that they use, or if they have speakers, or is it just like a real office space?
It can be any of those. Certainly, spaces that have recording or some sort of performance element to it are typically thought of as acoustical products or projects. But gosh, probably 70–80% of our work is on non-acoustical projects that involve corporate office spaces, healthcare facilities, making sure people can rest and recover and actually feel healthy when they leave a hospital. But also residences.
That would be helpful. Yeah.
Exactly. That's sort of a financial benefit of
Right.
the hospital, is to get people out and healthy and recovered. But a lot of our work is also making sure that multifamily residential projects function for people to feel separate, even though they're living with a neighbor right on the other side of a wall. So the mill building conversions that you're seeing happen all over the place, we're helping them work so that the person walking around on the floor above you doesn't make it feel like they're walking in the same room as you. So things like that. And then we also get into specialized projects for courthouses or government facilities, Defense Department work. So it's really broad. It's a neat business to be into because it's problem solving for almost anything you can think of in architecture, but also for my colleagues for products. We've worked on quieting toothbrushes to make them sound like a good toothbrush, an electric toothbrush, mind you.
Yeah, because my regular toothbrush doesn't make a lot
Doesn't
of noise.
make much sound. But yeah, we help make washing machines sound quieter or better, or lawn mowing equipment. So it's really exciting because acoustics plays a part in our lives, whether we realize it or not. It can influence you to buy something. It can influence you to stay away from something. So,
Right.
And along with the more typical, you want a performance to sound good when you go see the performance.
Right. I would say if I was a landscaper right now, I would pay for a landscaper with equipment that was soft sounding, like the
blowers.
the hedge trimmer. You know,
Yeah.
the one that
Oh,
goes
yeah.
around and you take the last pieces like
Well,
by
they
the
they
beds.
had those.
Yeah.
They had those that were very quiet.
Yeah.
They were clippers, you know.
Yeah, that takes obviously a long time, and mowers. But my question before you mentioned that part was apartment buildings, condos,
Yep.
and offices, all of those where you can actually hear people through walls and stuff. You work on stuff like that to negate all that, so you feel like this is your center of the world, nothing else around you, even though you're right next door.
Yes, and to some extent, the challenge is budget versus what we can
Right,
build
right.
for isolation. So we never talk about things being soundproof, because soundproof gives you the connotation of eliminating sound transfer, but managing the sound transfer to a level of expectation that people would be
On our show, we have no budget, Jeff.
unlimited.
Well, it's an unlimited budget, so give me that plan now.
No, you were right the first time. We have no budget.
No, so because I always think about that. Like sometimes I'll sit in my office and I'm about to get on a phone call, but I can actually hear the person next to me on their phone call, and that kind of is distracting at times. So I can see a lot of companies thinking, especially with sales, like I want
Yes.
to make sure my salespeople don't hear anybody else. They can only hear their phone and in their conversation.
Yeah, and the big driver these days is having people in open work plans.
I was just going
Right.
to say that.
So having all these people in essentially the same room all together, and some of those people might be on the phone talking with other people, but some might actually have to do concentrated work and produce things, whether it's a report or documents, and you need quiet for concentration.
Right.
So we can help introduce either talk with people about workstation barriers, which these days have been getting shorter and shorter, or talk about the sound-absorbing materials on the ceiling or possibly wall surfaces. But more likely, it's helping to cover up the sound with things like background sound.
Right.
And the white noise systems are things that we might help.
Do you go in and like? Do you know just based on when you walk into an office how sound absorbing the ceiling tiles may be, or the wood itself in general, the glass that sits in front of people's office, things like that?
Well, we certainly know the general sound reflection and absorption characteristics of many materials. Whether we recognize what the tile is
Right, right.
dependent on whether it's obvious or not. But we can go into situations and have an intuitive feeling for the situation based on what the materials are.
Right.
And again, the biggest factor for offices is often that it's way too quiet. And that quietness lets you hear people and give you the sense of noisiness,
Right.
even though actually it's really quiet in the background. But the noisiness comes from distraction. And to make that office more productive, typically it's covering up those noises that are distracting you so you can concentrate better and be more productive.
Wow.
So it's
there
not necessarily...
there goes a lot into acoustics, I see.
Yeah, it's fun because it's a problem-solving situation, and everyone's got a different way of doing things, so it's
Right.
always a new problem to solve.
So you have
sure.
to know what kind of materials absorb what type of sounds, or
Yeah, that's a big part of it, and that plays a big factor for designing spaces for where sound needs to sound good within that space. And then the other aspect is when we're trying to isolate different spaces, we need to know how much those materials are blocking the sound and what are the wall components that go into the construction for reducing that transmission to other spaces. So yeah, we're looking at both what's reflected, what's transmitted, what's absorbed, and also sometimes what's diffused. So you might think of some radio stations you've been to where there are all some really neat wood panels that have a lot of texture to them. And those are often helping blend the sound within the room and scatter the sound, which is also another aspect that we might look at.
so going back to the open space offices, because that's the big thing right now. That must be a challenge.
It is, and there's a lot of push to have employees work communally, thinking that it's good to be together, collaborate, be able to talk with people quickly to spread information. But that information that people are communicating to each other may be useful for the two people who are talking, or three people, but boy, there might be someone right next to them that's really just trying to focus on something. And you see a lot of younger generation just keep their earphones on all day.
Yeah, that's true.
And some
Yeah.
people do it that way, and maybe that music in the background is helpful. We tend to find there is research that says that music is still distracting you, even though it's a pleasant distraction, and you may find it something that you're comfortable with. It may keep you from being concentrated on the work you're trying to do.
And
So
it also aggravates your other employees who are trying to talk to you, and you can't hear them
Right.
because you have things jammed in your ears.
yeah.
You know, you call out, you're like, oh, hey. And, you know, now I got to walk all the way over. Or if you try
Yeah.
to call somebody, and you're like, oh, it's weird. And they're not at their desk. And then you walk over and they're sitting at their desk. And you're like, why didn't you pick up the phone? I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
hear it. Well, now you're not doing your job. You know, that's I can see that too. My other question was, what's easier, going in and fixing the acoustic problem within a building that's already designed, or going in pre-development and building an acoustic set, even though you don't know who's going to rent that space?
Well, typically we work for the people who are fitting out the space. So take, for example,
Okay.
downtown, we're doing a lot of corporate offices that are moving around in the musical chairs that are happening these days. And so we'd be hired by the architects who are fitting out that space
Okay.
for the tenant who's moving in. And it's certainly easier to solve problems in the design phase. You still grapple with budgetary issues and aesthetic challenges. Acoustical materials don't always look the way architects want. But dealing with those challenges in the design is far easier than trying to solve it after people have moved in,
Right.
the place is occupied, and you really don't want contractors coming back in.
Right.
So, yeah, probably let's say 80% of our work is design work.
Okay.
20% of our work is fixing problems that are already occurring out in
Mm-hmm.
the field and trying to actually get back to a solution that
Right.
might have been done before, just hadn't been thought of.
Yeah, I mean, that would be. I wonder how many times that's missed, though. You know, it must be. Well, probably now more that you guys are out and promoting this
Yeah.
and pushing this, but I would
Yeah.
assume it must have been like, oh, what do you mean acoustics? And then you
Yeah.
realize once it's. Now, do you have some way to show differences of like, this is what your room sounds like now,
Yeah.
fix this, and this is what it could sound like?
So for years upon years, we had a lot of graphics and a lot of visuals that we could put numbers together to show you the numbers. But about 10, 15 years ago, our company was really excited with some of the modeling technology. And a good example of applying that modeling technology was at the MFA Museum, where basically they put on that new wing of America's Wing, or Arts of the America's Wing. And the big glass courtyard where they have a cafe in the center that connects from the old museum to the new museum was originally proposed by the architect from Europe. And we looked at it and said, gosh, you're going to have 500 people for a fundraising dinner and expect they're going to understand what's being asked of them? And we said, you know what, all the numbers we can give you isn't going to explain the situation. So we actually modeled that space in a way that we could then translate it to something you could listen to. And
Nice.
you could listen to it with the design that was being proposed, and then we could make recommendations to the finishes and the surfaces that would make them more absorptive. And you could listen to it again and say, wow, that's what we
Right.
want. We have to make some changes. And that was actually an exciting project for us because it was the traditional balance of, okay, the architect would like it one design aesthetic, which is very clean and very nice looking. And we wanted it in a different direction with more sound absorption. And in the end, there was a balance of the two, which is working out fantastically. If you ever get to visit the Shapiro Courtyard, it's really a neat space because
Nice.
you can go in there and if they have a fundraising event or something is done in which they're trying to convey information and communicate to people, you can hear it clearly, even though you're in a big glass box.
Right.
So it's
That's
it's
the Museum of
exciting.
Fine Arts, by the way, Rick, the MFA. I didn't know if you knew that. Just wanted to break that down.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that.
I knew you were over there. You looked confused when he said MFA, and I think you were thinking, multifamily assistance, but it wasn't.
No,
It's the Museum of Fine Arts.
but it could have been multifamily assistance.
It could have been.
as
That's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
why I know in our industry, that's the first place you go to, the commercial real estate industry for all your acronyms.
Well, right now I want to go to a break.
Okay. I think that's a GTB,
No, now you have to explain to me.
right?
What's GTB?
What? Going to break.
Oh, going to break. Oh, my God, Eric. We're talking with Jeff Fullerton. He is a principal consultant in acoustics at Centec. And we'll be right back on Money Matters Radio Network.
Rick Kaplan and Eric Wilson, right here on the Money Matters Radio Network and online at moneymattersboston.com. New England Real Estate Journal Radio.
And we're back on New England Real Estate Journal Radio. I'm Rick Kaplan with Eric Wilson, and we're talking with Jeff Fullerton. He is a principal consultant in acoustics for Centec. And before we went to the break, you were talking a little bit about some of the projects that you were working on. What type of companies actually use your service, like architects,
Sure.
engineers?
So our primary clientele are the architects and engineers who are designing new spaces, and they bring us on either because they have past experience with acoustics, or past experience with us, or possibly the client has suggested that there are some acoustical issues that need to be solved. So that's primarily who we work for, although we do a lot of work also for owners, and those owners might be a university or it might be a corporation that needs us to come in and look at a specific element of their operation that needs some noise control.
Now, I have a question on, you were talking about earlier about mills, these old mills that they're converting now to
Yeah.
office space as well as multifamily.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you go in after the fact? These have been up for many years, and now you have to change the sound, because a lot of them used to be very echoey.
Yeah, well, and they're classic big open spaces, usually made with timber floors, and the historic aspects of them are often attractive to leave exposed. The idea of having this timber beam ceiling is often very
Well, that's
attractive
true,
to
yeah.
residences. The challenge is people also like hardwood floors, and so
Yeah.
there's an idea that, well, we'd like to just sort of clean everything up, put some walls up, make some residences, but those mill buildings were never intended to provide isolation, particularly when you have two spaces stacked above each other. And so we find that to accomplish the code requirements for multifamily buildings, but also just the expectations of the residents, we often have to introduce flooring materials that introduce mass and some isolation. And that way you can block the sound of voices, TVs, but also reduce the footfall impacts that you would otherwise hear. So it's working with the architect through the design process to say, you know what, that timber floor is a great structure. It's going to support a lot of weight, which it has done for years, maybe hundreds of years, but it's so strong and so stiff, it's also going to transfer sound very well. Or in one case, you could actually look through the timber beams to below. Not a good situation. So whether it's the flooring materials on top, which is often attractive because then you can leave the underside exposed, which residents like, or some sort of ceiling below, leaving the floors exposed. Those are two approaches.
So you would have to put some kind of covering on either the top or the bottom of that flooring.
Yep.
You couldn't leave it exposed on both sides.
No, it's doing that, you essentially allow for the sound of footfalls to be clearly heard downstairs, and it would wake people up. It would bother people when they're trying to talk, watch TV, and do
because
any
so many
activities.
times you'll go into that type of a structure that they're working on, and you see they do keep them exposed.
Yeah.
I was just kind of curious on how if they keep them exposed, then they can't really have to worry about how the sound is being transferred in that
and
property.
those are the projects we get called in after the fact.
When the residents start complaining, I can
Right.
hear my neighbor constantly.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And yet we've also done some neat projects where we've dropped a ceiling below the beams in the lower unit and covered it back up with rough sawn wood, and it looks like the original deck, but you've got a great sound isolating construction that doesn't allow you to hear the transmission.
Well, I was just wondering what if they just tore up the flooring and put some kind of a sound, something that absorbed the sound, and then put the flooring back down.
I'm sure there are contractors who might elaborate on that, but I suspect the cost of tearing it up and putting it back down,
Yeah,
and also
I'm
the
sure
condition of some of these floors is not very attractive. So oftentimes we're putting the sound isolating materials on the floors because we have to cover it up and start fresh.
But now a lot of them also brick.
Yes.
So you have a lot of brick
Yep.
wall.
Yep.
So how do you work with brick?
Sure. So one of the things with
Stack
brick...
them. Oh, sorry.
So one of the things with brick is often that if it's used for the exterior wall, it needs some sort of covering of insulation because for thermal reasons, you don't want the brick exposed. So oftentimes that gets covered up. But there are projects where it's left exposed. And the biggest challenge with brick is actually how do you have a wall end at a brick wall and seal that up, because the brick has all those different edges of grout and mortar and the brick face, and a wall needs to seal tightly to that to prevent sound from going between two spaces. So that's often the biggest challenge, is just making sure the contractor knows he needs a lot of tubes of caulk and a guy just caulking for days upon days.
So now, what kind of material would you put on that?
Over the brick, typically for thermal insulation, they might do a stud construction with a drywall surface. And for acoustics, that can work just fine. For an exposed brick with a wall ending at it, it's just a sealant, a silicone sealant that can move with the constructions over time and make sure that it's just an airtight gap or seal.
What about these old buildings, the wind? You know, you hear howling wind come through walls all the time. Is that something that you have to be prepared for when you first build it? Like, okay, what's going to leak? What the window might not be fully sealed? And there's all sorts of different things when it comes to that.
Yeah, so we don't often get called in for wind noise issues, but one of the things with the exterior of a building is related to the outdoor conditions. And a great example of work we do for keeping out outdoor noise is either around the commuter rail, around Logan, around highways, all of those things. With the density of population, we're building closer to these louder sources. And gosh, we've got a lot of developments going right up against the commuter rail line. And It's a pretty loud train that goes by
that
a number
could
of
be
times.
Another
late at
reason
night.
for space travel, densing the population.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are you so the soundproof on the highways? We see those being constructed right now on 95. They're
Yep.
slapping those things in there. How efficient are those for the people behind it?
Well, the intent of that barrier is to reduce sound by somewhere between 5 to 10 decibels, and most people would perceive a change like that of being 20 to 50% of a reduction.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a fairly good reduction
Right.
for the immediate neighbors. Once you start getting further away, the sky, the wind, and all the other meteorological things can reduce that number,
Mm-hmm.
but it's for those immediate neighbors that the benefit is for.
Right. Okay.
So,
Now,
So
how do you-
it is good. Obviously,
is.
50% noise reduction.
So
is
how do you
pretty
get
sweet.
an actual reading on the decibels
noise?
on the different noise levels?
so we have a room full of equipment that we can measure things with, and it ranges from handheld sound level meters that'll tell us to the 10th of a dB how loud sound is. We might measure for the barriers on one side of the wall, then measure on the other and look at the difference to determine that. With barriers, it's interesting because you often don't necessarily want to measure just at the ground location, but you might want to measure higher up in the air to see how much the reduction is at different heights of the barrier. But yeah, there's plenty of equipment these
But
days.
now, so when you go to do that, do you bring a whole crew of people to make a lot of noise, or you bring some instruments that bang,
It often depends. If it's a highway, usually the highway's just going. And for other transportation sources, you might just wait for the plane to fly over or the train to go by. But we also, along with equipment that measures sound, we also have a lot of loudspeakers that produce a lot of sound. So we can't necessarily produce a concert, but we've got some really loud sound equipment.
Well, and speaking of that, you also do audio and video equipment.
We do, and one example is for the MFA. We helped design the sound system at the Museum of Fine Arts.
Hey, thanks for breaking that down for Rick.
We helped integrate a sound system that could direct the sound to the listeners on the floor rather than just send the sound into the whole space. And by doing that, we were focusing the sound where it wanted to be instead of just sending it out into the room where it could reflect around too long.
Right.
But my colleagues who work on what we call systems, or information technology systems, they do everything from airport communication systems to boardrooms to a wide range of athletic facilities and the sound systems for those, and even performing arts centers and the sound systems that go into those. And it's amazing the way in which the information technology and the audio systems have melded together these days so that much of this is so easy to create in a digital format. And it's a lot of what we're doing is creating the pathways of infrastructure and the connections of the equipment, and then all of that just goes onto a digital backbone that relays it around.
So when you're putting in the equipment, being in the acoustic
Spit it
arena,
out.
Yep.
That you have that can help with the sound quality of the audio equipment that they're putting in.
It can, and so oftentimes our group who works on the systems and us in the architectural side will talk to really make sure that the equipment they're selecting is appropriate for the application. If we've got an atrium, we don't want to just broadcast the sound everywhere in the atrium. We'd really like to put it where it needs to go for people to hear it.
That's a good point. You can direct the sound to fit to a certain area.
There's more and more speaker systems that allow you to basically put the sound where it needs to be heard rather than just broadcast it into the whole volume of the space, the way we've done for so many years up until probably about 10 years ago. These systems really became more popular. So we can aim the sound toward the audience rather than just have it liven up the room. And when you fill a room with sound from a sound system, oftentimes that makes it less intelligible and less clear. So that can be a problem that even though you make it loud as could be, you still don't understand it, even if it's louder.
Yeah.
So the intent of the design is really to make the clarity and the intelligibility of the system.
How did you get into the acoustic field yourself?
So myself, I was a mechanical engineer by education, and at the same time I worked backstage in a performing arts center on campus, which happened to be designed by the company I work for. And actually, the very recent exciting part of this was I melded those two things together to essentially enter my career here at Ascentech. But we actually just won a contract to go back to that Performing Arts Center and improve it, because right now it's really designed like Symphony Hall, but they use it for lectures and all sorts of other things where the clarity isn't there. So we're actually excited to be working on that and improving it. So.
Nice. Look at that. I brought you full circle all
That's
in
right.
one question.
So, Jeff, if someone is interested in having someone come down and look at their property, or are interested in putting together a property that they have acoustical problems or eliminate the problem, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, people can reach us through our website, acentech.com, acentech.com. We often, again, work for architects and engineers. We do some work for residences, but our rates are not necessarily geared for a residential consumer market. But people should reach out to us, because we're always curious to
Any of
see
those
if we can
people
help.
that are buying those million-plus homes, they could use your
Especially
service.
before the Super Bowl, so we can
That's right.
aim it all right to your couch, so you
That's
don't even have
right.
to move. You can just hear everything to
You
you.
can hear all the footballs deflating.
All the footballs being inflated before halftime. I just had to throw that out there. Big Patriots fan, yeah. Big Patriots fan.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the show, Jeff.
Definitely. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you very much for having me.
And we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to
Wrap up.
have a little wrap up. You're welcome to join us, and we'll be right back on Money Matters Radio Network.
Rick Kaplan is right here on the Money Matters Radio Network.
We're back on New England Real Estate Journal Radio. I'm Rick Kaplan with Eric Wilson, and we have Jeff Fullerton. He's still in the studio with us, and you can chime in anytime you want.
Yep.
You know, we're
Sure.
And help fix Rick's acoustics.
I don't think
As
there's
you
any.
can. He's on repeat right now.
You know, Eric.
I know, I'm on fire
I
today,
know,
Rick.
hey.
On fire.
I'm thinking of it.
You're like, I'm not putting you out. We have a big event coming up next week. I want to see everybody there. We're already up over 150. We should close in on 200 by the end of the week.
Yeah. We should
All
be about
commercial real
200.
estate professionals.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great time. Definitely come out and check it out.
And we have,
Hyatt Regency.
a great conversation goes on. A lot of contacts you'll make. It's a great event to be
Right.
at.
Also in February, the ski. Are you going skiing, Rick?
Iron.
Is
Yeah.
it February 4th or 6th?
I don't know.
Man, I should remember these things.
I don't
Check
know.
it out on ironboston.org. You can find out.
Yeah, you
they're
should
doing
come.
a
You'll
big
see me
ski
on the
trip.
slopes.
Yeah, in his tight jeans.
Yeah.
Rick skis like the guys from Better Off Dead. Ski
I don't know who that is, but
It's a great movie. John Cusack. He wears skinny jeans, high tops, and a big what are those old starter jackets? It's a Patriot starter jacket, though. At least he's supporting the home team.
yeah, no, I have the Apres ski boots.
The capris,
Yeah.
the capri pants.
No, the Apres
Oh.
ski boots.
Apres.
With the, the fur on them.
Yeah.
And it looks like a Lhasa Apso you're walking in.
Right. And a pair of Uggs.
Yeah.
Right. Looks like some Ugg boots.
Yeah.
So he's styling. You'll definitely see some photos.
That's
Check out
right.
our Facebook
You'll
page.
After that description, you're definitely going to recognize me on the slope.
Yeah, right. And you
Where's
can
the
see-
skiing at?
The skiing
Loon
is
Mountain.
Loon Mountain.
Oh, Loon.
Loon
Yeah.
Mountain in New
Check it out.
Hampshire.
IronBoston.org. It's a great time. Everybody at Iron's awesome.
Yeah.
Great organization. And there's actually a big today in Connecticut was their breakfast, their economic forecast breakfast. So check them out.
Yeah,
And-
we do an awful lot of things with them, as well as you can meet them at our event.
They will
They'll
be
be
at our event
there,
as well.
as CCIM, BOMA, REFA, who else? CAI,
Yeah.
USGBC in Boston.
I believe IFMA,
IFMA, SMPS.
right?
They'll all be there. So you get to
You
meet
find-
all the new leadership
Yeah.
and all the people that are involved in the organization.
And find out what they're doing and what their plans for 2015 are, and
Exactly.
maybe they involve you, or they should.
Yeah, they all have great things that go on, and they
Mm-hmm.
all have a wealth of knowledge about their segment of the industry.
Right, I agree.
And just one question, which event are you talking about now?
We're talking about cocktails
skiing?
and
Yeah,
conversation.
this is back to
back to
cocktails.
cocktails, all right.
Cocktails and conversation.
Yeah,
That's our event.
The Hyatt
All right.
Regency, you'll get to meet all the associations we just mentioned in their 2015 leadership. We started it last year. This is actually our second one. Another great idea from our captain over there, Rick, and he said we should do a networking event.
I am great, huh?
You are great. He said, let's do a networking event, and he set it up. We wanted to do. At first, it was going to be like the great projects of the year, and it kind of changed into, you know what? Not a lot of people know. I mean, everyone knows about these associations, but they don't always attend the events. They don't know who the leadership is. They don't know what their plans are and how they can benefit them. So Rick was like, we should bring them all together in one room, because they don't do a lot. There's some associations will do cross events. You might get like a NEMA IRM. But they don't all get together in one room and kind of see how they can benefit each other.
Yeah, and we
if
also
they work together.
from going to all the different events throughout the city, and we go throughout New England as well. We find that a lot of people go, they'll listen to speakers, and that's great. But the networking factor
Is what they're there
is
for.
always very short for them, and it becomes usually just groups of people that already know each other, and they never get to meet new people. Our events, we bring in people from all aspects of the commercial real estate industry. So we have attorneys, insurance, brokers, developers,
Finance.
contractors, finance. We have them all there. So you get to meet a lot of different people from a lot of different aspects of the commercial real estate industry.
Some real face-to-face
And
networking.
it's
all
exactly.
face-to-face.
It
That's
goes back to the old days when it was face-to-face. You're not talking to someone on a computer or on the cell phone.
Right?
You're
Nice.
meeting them in
And you don't have to
person.
listen to anybody speak. It's just about you going there to help your business.
Yeah.
That's it. We're not going to tell you about great trends. There's a million of these associations that already do that for you.
Right.
Yeah.
All we're trying to do is bring you all into one room, get to meet each other, and enjoy the 2015 year.
And,
Nice.
and the nice part about the whole thing is everyone walks out there with a stack of business cards that people they have
And
met.
they all say Rick
great.
Kaplan. No.
Well, unfortunately, we have to go now,
Yeah,
Eric. On that note, I want to thank you, Jeff, for coming in.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
And I'll say my final words. This deal is done.